All right, welcome back. We are going on lesson 28B.
9. 29?
28B.
28.
28B. So today our learning objectives are that you can evaluate Q for a broad-crested weir, evaluate Q for an orifice, and determine the difference between a weir and an orifice. So before we get started, a little bit of quick review. We have our specific energy diagram here, showing that for certain energies that are above the energy critical, you can have two depths, a subcritical depth and a supercritical depth. And for those depths, that makes flow measurement basically impossible. So in general, with our control structures, what we're trying to do is we're trying to knock that energy back down to the critical point. We can have a one depth, one discharge relationship. Our main equations for calculating our critical depth are the following two, where we have for a rectangular channel this equation, which is little q squared, that's our unit discharge over gravity raised to the 1/3. See that here, or it's 2/3 energy critical. For all other shapes, it's going to be big Q squared over G, AC cubed over TC. Definitely don't forget your cube. That is the most common error that I see with that. So before we move on, quickly we're going to go over the solutions for worksheet 28A. That was from last time. So for the sharp-crested weir, going through there, you're not using the approach velocity. Your depth h that you're solving for should be 3.83. And if you do use approach velocity, it should be 3.67, so that shows that that's a fairly minimal difference. For part B, your solution should have been h of 6.9 with that contraction. So you have to make sure that you use that contraction, which is the actual opening width. And then for a V-notch weir with 60 degrees, that h should have been 9.51 using a CD 0.58. So you've got that solution posted on Canvas. You can look at it if you can't see it here in the video, but that's what that should look like. So we are going to move on to our material today. So we'll be looking at a broad-crested weir. And before I get started too far into it, take a look at our broad-crested weir. This is an example of one of our broad-crested weirs. This has got the larger crest width on it. And you can see that compared to a sharp-crested weir, this crest width here is fairly large. That gives you an example of what we're looking at there. So for a broad-crested weir, what we have will be something like this. So we're looking at a broad-crested weir. We've got our channel bed. And we have an approach and a downstream ramp for our broad-crested weir. What will happen with our broad-crested weir is our flow will do something like that. Generally, it will return back to some subcritical level downstream. What we're looking at here is broad-crested weir will create this entire area here of critical flow. And generally, what we'll have here is we will have our height of the weir. And then, like all the other weir equations, we'll have our head, which is our flow rate or our flow level over the crest of the weir. And we'll have our Q coming in here, flow rate going in that direction, and then flow leaving here. So for our broad-crested weir equation, what it looks like is Q is equal to CD square root of G, B, which is our width of the crest, times 2/3 H raised to the 3/2. This is equation 7.101 on page 295. And for a broad-crested weir, you can actually calculate what CD is, and the equation for that is CD is 0.65 over 1 plus the head over the weir crest divided by the height of the weir raised to the 1/2. And this is also on page 295, and it is equation 7.102. So that gives you an idea for the broad-crested weir, how you can actually do the calculations for that. But the broad-crested weir has some other modifications to it. These are similar to what we saw before. When we were looking at our sharp-crested weirs, we had them either suppressed, which means they span the entire channel, or we had them where they were contracted, and you could contract them either against the sidewall or not. For broad-crested weirs, because they're often used on dams, we have modifications that are piers. And abutments. And this is going to be very similar to what we do for sharp-crested weirs, and the equation is B prime that you plug in is going to be B minus 2 times N Kp plus K sub A times the head total, and I'm going to define all those pieces here pretty quickly. Where B prime is your effective crest width. So if you remember back, right, we had to use that B prime. Why did we have to use that B prime? Why did we have to use that B prime, Jackson?
Because it doesn't actually flow through the entire width of the weir.
Right.
And water doesn't go at 90 degrees.
Right. Water's like zoom number. So that's why we have to use this B prime for the effective crest width. So B in this equation is going to be the net crest length. So to make sure to do this, this is going to be your measured opening minus the width of your piers. N is the number of piers. Kp is your pier coefficient. Ka is your abutment coefficient. It's going to depend on whether your channel has square abutments, rounded abutments, depending on how those are actually built. And Ht, that's going to be the total head on the crest, including velocity. What that looks like, put that under here. The total head is going to be your head over the crest of the weir from here, plus approach velocity squared over 2g. So that is what you would do for your total head in that calculation. So we're going to take a look at a couple of videos real quick. See if we can turn off all these lights. Maybe the screen will come out a little better. Still not any better yet.
Yeah, it's just super washed out.
So here's an example of a broad-crested weir in a channel. So this is a channel, you've got water flowing through it, and there's actually nothing in there at all. Now you've got a broad-crested weir in there. You can see that example as the water builds up over that. You're going to get that critical flow occurring over the crest of that broad-crested weir. The great thing about the broad-crested weir is because they've got a long length, you actually end up being able to have that critical flow occurring over a wider range of flows. It just doesn't have a sharp crest, and so it works really well for measuring very different flow conditions across varying levels of flow. So that's why broad-crested weirs are one of the most commonly used measurement tools, either by the Bureau of Reclamation or otherwise. You can see what happens now when you're getting backed up flow. You get a little bit of a hydraulic jump, and as long as this water level back here doesn't rise, your weir is still measuring. If you kick this flow up high enough to drown out your broad-crested weir, all bets are off, and your measurements at that point become essentially useless. So you want to make sure that your downstream water level is not affecting what's happening in your broad-crested weir. So that gives you a good example of what that looks like. I'll probably send out these two videos that I want to show with the video once we've got that recorded and posted. Let's take a look at the second video. We're going to skip that. So this is a large stream. You can see that you've got this broad-crested weir in here. That's what they're using for flow, and they've actually got 3 different ones depending on what flow level they're at. So it gives you an example of what one of these structures can do, and you can stagger it to look at very different flow depths. We've also got some drop structures and some baffle blocks down here. I'll talk about those when we get to energy dissipation, but that gives you an idea of what we're looking at. So, what you should probably do now is you should probably stop your video, and then, not you, should stop your video and look at worksheet 28B. That should take you about 10 or 15 minutes. So turn off your video, start working on that worksheet, and then when I return, we will continue on with orifices. All right. Now, we are going to move on to how to calculate flow using an orifice, which is another common flow measurement structure. So what does an orifice even look like? So generally, you can have 2 different kinds. You can have some where you're going to do a side view, where it's like a sluice gate. Your water level set at some level up here, and your flow is going through there. You've got a small little opening like that, and your water is going to shoot out. And generally, what you're looking at, the important feature structure here is going to be H, the difference in flow, and you can also have orifices that look like this, where you have water level like that, you have opening here, and if water is pouring out like that, that would still qualify as an orifice. And for that kind of orifice, the main important thing is going to be the head, usually in feet, over the center of that opening. Okay, and what that looks like from a side view, for example, like this one here, you have an opening that looks like that. That's what that would look like. You'd be shooting water out of it, and I've got an example of one of those to show you here. 3D example of an orifice. And what that looks like is something like that. So you'd be, if you're standing downstream of this, you would see this opening, and then water would be pouring out of it, especially if the head of that water was over all of this. And we'll talk about the difference between the weir and the orifice, because this structure could actually be both, which would make that really tricky. So, in this case, right, you would have water up to here, and water would just be pouring out of this, looking like that. So the equation for an orifice goes as follows. It's Q is equal to CD AO, A sub O, which is the area of the orifice, 2G head over the center of the orifice raised to the 1/2. It's a very straightforward equation. Your discharge coefficient CD okay, that depends on the edges. Are they rounded? Are they jagged? Etc. A sub O is the area of the orifice opening, and H sub O is the head over the center of the orifice. Okay? So I just want you to be completely aware that orifices can be really tricky. So first off, what happens is the water level here drops to here. What do you think happens? What do you think happens, Andrew?
Once the water level is at the...
Yeah, so once this opening is no longer under pressurized flow, what do you think happens here?
Discharge is reduced?
Yeah, the discharge is going to be reduced, but once you have atmosphere in here, this whole structure starts acting like a weir. Because it no longer has pressurized flow. So we're going to quickly do a demo, right? Because we love flooding things in this class. We've actually got an orifice, actually 3 orifices. It should be quite fun to do this demo without flooding everything. So as you can see, I've got 3 orifices. Orifices can be square, they can be round. Got 3 different orifices under different flow conditions. Okay? And if I open these all at the same time, the water level in this bucket is completely up to the top, you're going to get a good idea of what will happen in terms of the flow rate, right? Which one of these is going to shoot the furthest?
Bottom.
The bottom one, right? Because it has the highest head, the highest level of water over it. So that one's going to shoot the furthest. And I'm going to open these up real quick. You get an idea that that is correct. And as the flow keeps dropping and dropping, you see how that flow rate gets reduced, right? As the head keeps coming down, this jet, or velocity coming out of here from continuity decreases, and you get less and less water coming out of it, to the point where this one's going to quit really soon. And then this one, because that water level now is only about this high, has very similar flow rates as this one did at the beginning. So you get an idea that that reduces things pretty substantially in terms of flow rate. So close this guy off here. You get the idea of how that head, right, is essentially what affects everything, because these guys all have the exact same area of the orifice and the exact same CD going through there. Okay, now, I had mentioned that these things can be really tricky. And I want to make sure that there's no confusion going forward, especially with the celebration of knowledge, is that there can be both of these happening in the same structure. So this, we're going to be looking at the difference between a weir and an orifice, because you will have a problem like this on your celebration of knowledge, and you will end up having to deal with this in your life. What happens is, I'm going to draw the same exact structure 2 times. Okay, here's our opening. One is the view from downstream. And this is going to be the case for the weir. So what can happen here is the following. If you've got your water level behind here at this level, and it's the same level here, what's going to happen is that's going to act as a weir. And if we're talking about hydraulic structures, the bottom of the structure here, this is always what we call the invert. Okay, if we're looking at this same structure and we're thinking that it's an orifice, what makes it an orifice is that that flow is going to be under pressure, right? There's not going to be atmospheric pressure at that structure. So I'm going to draw, hopefully, the exact same thing. So if we have that same structure there, same opening here, and let's say our water level's up here, okay, if it's here, that means that is orifice flow happening because you're completely under pressure. So that essentially gives you an idea of the difference between those two, because if, for example, I was to show you this structure right here, this is a demo to show you the difference between the two structures. This structure here, I'll take these lids off. This structure here on the right, this is always going to behave as a weir. No question about which equation you're going to use. You're going to use the sharp-crested weir equation to do the solution for this guy. This guy, not so much. This guy has the possibility of having to use both equations. So if the water level in this guy is below this upper part of the orifice, it's going to act like a weir. But if the water level behind it is above there, it's going to have pressure. It's going to act like an orifice. So that gives you an idea of the difference between those two types of structures. So you've got the equation for an orifice, you've got the equation for broad-crested weirs, and those corrections. So I recommend at this point that you do worksheet 28C. Once you've done that, check in here. Do you think you can evaluate Q for a broad-crested weir?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Can you evaluate Q for an orifice?
Definitely.
Definitely. Key point here. Make sure that it's always to the center of the orifice. That's the biggest error that I see in those. And then determine the difference between weir and orifice. I think you've got a pretty good handle on that. Just make sure that you know when to switch those equations. So on the celebration of knowledge, draw this out. Make sure that you actually draw out the problem before it's given to you, because that is one of the most common hydraulic mistakes made. And if you're doing this with other people's water, you make a lot of farmers and other people. So once you've completed worksheet 28B and 28C, I think you can complete all those lesson objectives. Have yourselves a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time for lesson 29, and that will be channel transition.